Love Your Kitchen, Designing the Heart of the Home, proudly sponsored by Blum, the podcast where we explore the art of crafting your dream kitchen. I'm your host, Faye Newman, a freelance kitchen designer with a passion for creating spaces that truly reflect the heart of the home. Hello and welcome to another episode of Love Your Kitchen. Thank you for joining me. It's always very much appreciated. For today's episode, I am talking about 5 features that I would definitely introduce into my kitchen. So these will be universal, so it doesn't matter about the style of kitchen you are going for, the layout, or even your own storage preferences. As a whole, they will enhance the overall usability and look of the design without needing to spend too much money. So feature 1 would be your cabinet colour. So I know talking about the inside of your cabinets is not really the most glamorous part of your kitchen design. However, I do feel it plays a very important role. This is because from a practical point of view, if you are having, say, quite a dark kitchen and you've got a white internal cabinet colour, if you're going for a conventional lay-on door, which is when the hinge is attached to the door and then the door opens as one, you will see a gap around the doors, so that they can open and close. Naturally, manufacturers have to leave a gap at the top, the bottom, and either side of the door so that the doors can open without sort of scraping on the one next to it. You will see a white outline going around the door. Or if you haven't seen it before, you definitely will notice it now. So apologies about that. So that's one reason why I would look to, specifically if you're going for quite a bold colour, or as I say, a dark colour, look to go for a dark internal as well. Some clients are a bit sort of hesitant with this because they find it harder to look into a cabinet when you've got sort of a dark internal colour. So sometimes you can just change the front edging of the cabinet, which is useful because it solves the function of seeing the white outline, but also gives the option for a lighter internal if needed to, actually on the inside. Equally as well, white is conventional for everywhere, so why not, add a bit of personality and add a little bit of something different inside of the cabinet, especially if you're going for, say, like a traditional kitchen. It's nice to see sort of a wood effect inside. It could match up nicely with your wooden floor, your display cabinets. It's just forward thinking, the look of the inside as well as the outside. And equally, the matte colours, so say if you're going for like a taupe, or if you're going for a porcelain door and you've got an option for a porcelain interior, even though they're only sort of slight variances, those sort of block matte colours are usually the same cost as a white anyway. So why would you not try and match that or make that look a little bit different so that it looks more expensive? So that's my sort of ideology about it. Equally, if you've got a white kitchen door and you've got a white cabinet to match up with that, then that works as well. It's whatever your preference is. The second feature I would 100% have in my kitchen would be the introduction of having a hot tap. So for many years now, hot taps have been on the rise sort of throughout the kitchen industry. I think it's more of a case of clients are fearful that, it's something new, and the kettle's been there as part of the kitchen for years. So it's really difficult to change your mindset to be like, okay, this is something that I can use daily, and change something that you've used for lots of years prior to that. So, but for me, I would have a hot tap purely because I drink so much green tea or herbal teas. So 1, it's just a convenience thing for me. 2, obviously you've got the sustainability aspect of it as well. Boiling a kettle several times isn't great. I have to boil it lots throughout the day because I drink a lot of tea. It's got an environmental impact there as well. You've got the options to obviously add on your sparkling water if you want to, your filtered water, so that you're not buying bottled water. So there's lots to think about. And equally, there are a lot of companies out there that can help you with this. I would always personally choose Quooker. I've used different brands throughout my time in terms of at different showrooms, and for me the taste is different and it's a lot cleaner from that perspective as it actually boils to 100 degrees. So that's why for me Quooker is sort of my top preference overall. If you're going for quite a traditional looking kitchen, naturally you might want to go for what's called a bridge tap, which has 2 tap holes and it looks quite traditional. And then you can have a spray tap option on one side and then a smaller sort of boiling tap on the other. That looks great as well. So Perrin and Rowe are a great brand for this. Equally, from a price point of view, the more taps and sections you're buying, the more naturally that will increase. So that is an investment, and a boiling water tap is an investment anyway, but it is one that I would rather personally sort of take something else out of the design in order to warrant the price of a hot water tap. Equally as well now, because they have been around for several years, there's so many different styles available of hot taps, different finishes. So even though they can be seen as quite a contemporary tap, they have introduced more ornate elements in like the detail, and so that you don't need to impact the function of your space to go for a traditional design. So 100% I would look at the different styles and features out there to find the best sort of solution for you. The third feature is definitely introducing lighting in all display cabinetry, under shelves and on the top of cabinets. So we talk about lighting in the latter half of this episode, where I talk to the managing director of Sensio Lighting. It really is an inexpensive way to enhance the overall design. So if you've got, say, like a 5-meter strip of lighting, use it on top of your cabinets, like use it underneath to highlight all of those lovely display shelves that you're looking to introduce in the design. There's so many options out there, and it's up to us as your designer to help you manage that and work with you so that from a functional aspect it's working perfectly, and also aesthetically it's giving you the different lights and settings that you need sort of throughout the day. So the fourth one is a nice and easy one. If you're looking to buy sort of a new dishwasher, I would look to have one with a floor indicator light. So that does what it says on the tin. It essentially tells you how long's left on your dishwashing cycle, so that you say if you've got half an hour of that, and then you can then pop the washing machine on or whatever, you can just plan around your day for those things, which sounds very exciting, I know. You can also have ones that don't show the full timer, for instance, and they're called info lights. So this is when it's almost like a laser red dot on the floor, just projects straight from underside of the dishwasher to the floor. And again, it just indicates when the load is running. Naturally, when that turns off, that it's safe to open the door and you won't get a face full of steam. So I personally think from just an ease perspective, they're really great. I know my parents absolutely love theirs at home, so we looked at I persuaded them to have a Remodel when they renovated their kitchen a couple of years ago. Quite a funny story with this one, actually. We thought that the appliance actually wasn't working, but it turns out that the black seal that's on the underside of your dishwasher, that was the opposite way, so that there wasn't a space for the light to be projected onto the floor. So we thought that we had the wrong model, or that the light sensor wasn't working. And I can't remember whether we actually got to the point of needing to speak to the manufacturer, and then Dean the fitter was like, oh, we've put this the wrong way round, which is obviously naturally what happened. So which is, quite a funny story, but it happens to us all, even when you're in the industry, apparently. That would be my fourth feature that I would include for sure. And then the fifth one, this will depend on your supplier, but I would look to go for high side drawers all over your kitchen. I think from a usability perspective, they're just easier when you're storing lots of little items. It works really well, obviously, because they're not sliding out the sides. And normally you have sort of a gap either side of your pan drawers, for instance. Obviously, if you've got sort of your pots and pans, etc., they're quite big, so they won't fall out the gap. Again, I think from my perspective, I would personally, if you can, opt for high sides everywhere, so that if when you're sort of moving your storage and adapting your kitchen sort of, over the years, you've got the flexibility of being able to store different things in different places and not have to think, oh, actually, I can't pop that Tupperware down there like I want to because it's going to fall out the side. And actually, they're not normally too much of an extra cost as well. So if you think about, so say if you're spending a couple of £100, maybe not even that, on those, again, dependent on which supplier you're going for, it just enhances the overall function and usability of the space. So those are my top 5 tips that I've got for you today. I hope they've been helpful, and if you're sort of in the midst of your project, it's given you something new to think about. Or if it's a case of that, it hadn't even crossed your mind, any of these elements, hopefully, you can go back to your designer or go back to your supplier just to ask whether this is an option that can be included for you, just so that your kitchen, works better, looks better, and is just a little bit more personalized to you. If you've got any questions on any of the above, or you need advice about anything, please do just get in touch with me. For the main part of this episode, I am speaking to the lovely Michael Linsky, who is the Managing Director of Sensio Lighting. As we know, lighting is a vital part of any project, and it is important that you at home knows exactly what's out there so that you can really evolve your kitchen design by just a few simple elements, which won't break the bank. So I will start by asking my usual question, Michael, which is, could you please give us some insight into your role within Sensio and the heritage of your brand?
It's quite an interesting journey because I've been lucky to be able to start it from nothing. So the roles drastically changed from me and my dad in a garage with no staff, no people, no knowledge, no money, no funding, no insight, pretty much nothing. It's built and it's changed vastly. And I think because you're starting with nothing and you start small, you have to adapt, you have to change, and the role has to become different. So my first role, if you wanted to talk it in roles, was packing boxes was my first role. And then I had the role taking orders from a fax machine. That was another role. It's changed, and I've been lucky to do every single job in the business. Now, I'm not good at everything. I'm actually not very good at many things apart from the odd things. And where my role has progressed to now is very much more about people, making sure we've got the right team of people, that we have a good story to tell, which is clear and generates value for people, but also something that's exciting and something that people want to be a part of, but never losing focus of the customer. So my role now is more inspiring, telling stories, and making sure we can find value for us customers.
I've been using your products for years, and I actually never knew that there was a family business element to it. So I've learned that already, and we're only at the start of this episode. So that's great to hear. And obviously, that's good for us as designers to relay on to clients as well. So obviously, you've got the family element and sort of the heritage of the company. So what makes Sensio sort of unique?
I think in the early days, you talk about a journey. In the early days, we had no idea what we were, how we were going to add value, what we were going to do, because it was just me and my dad in a garage and a van. And I think in your early days, you don't really have a clue. You're just trying to do something. And it's the accumulation of 24 years of experience of talking to people is where you find value. And what makes us unique is we're a business that's very much about focusing to solve problems through innovation. So I don't want us to design and innovate another bloody light someone else has already got, because there's no value in it. You can have a billion lights and no one cares. What I'm really focused on with our team is to solve problems and make things easier, because our category is quite complex. And for designers, you've got to be good at a lot of different things. And when people then get to the lighting category, it's complex. There's too many drivers. You've got to talk about voltage, and there's wattages and what connects to what and why should I do it? And people just can't be asked. So we're very focused on being empowering designers and educating of the effect of what lighting can do, but in a very simple system. And that's what differentiates us. In the UK, we're the only lighting company to have our own engineering, our own design, which means then we're actually designing the products.
No, that's very true. And I think even the more we learn, the more the end user, so the listeners at home, will learn from it as well. And we can obviously offer, rather than just put in the standard under cabinet task lighting, just being like, oh yeah, warm whites is the norm to go for. We can actually make it more bespoke and more specific per design for those clients. So I think that's really good to know. And I think lighting as well is just an afterthought for clients. Like it really is. Like there's so many decisions to make prior to it, and it's almost a conversation when, unless you've got sort of a team in place that's doing sort of lighting planning, if you're doing like a self build or something like that, like you've got somebody in to help you with all of that section. It's literally your electrician that comes to you and he's like, or she is like, what do you want to do for lights? And it's like you've got to make the decision within a day or so to be like, do you want your sockets there? How do we make it work? So
And I find this point really interesting. So designers are effectively trying to design the furniture to the best it looks, to make the best designs, to make the client happy, and to create something which everyone's really happy with. But lighting has such a big impact on the design of the space. People would then give it to an electrician that does not care less about how it's designed in, but cares about how it's installed in and how it's quick and how it's easy. And actually, as kitchen designers, lighting is one of the most important categories that finishes off how that final design looks.
yeah, it's so true. And I always say, especially with sort of open plan living and things like that, like, you know, you just haven't got a single room at the moment now, have you? Like it's always like a kitchen diner, or everything's completely open plan from the ground floor, you know, perspective. I mean, I've had it before where I've got into properties and say they've after bought the lights and they've had to add in sort of separate like lamps and things like that to try and dull down the really bright LEDs that aren't on dimmable switches or anything. Like they're just, as soon as they're on, they're on, and there's like 20 of them within like a 3 square meter dimension.
Lighting design doesn't mean it has to look like Leeds and Bradford Airport. It has to be done subtly and it has to be appropriate for the furniture. But it's normally so far down that list of priorities or categories when installing's happening. Actually, it needs to be brought up to the front. And what we find is that you can take a £5,000 kitchen and you can make it look like it's worth 15,000 by a couple of £100 worth of lights.
So true. And it's just these small design considerations, isn't it? And it's the same with sort of what pendant lights and things you piece with it, and making sure that's the same hue as your task lighting. Like, I mean, I worked for a company beforehand, and their showroom, they have tall cabinetry, and then they've actually just put one of your 5 meter lighting strips above the furniture. And it just sort of elevates it. And I know it's a showroom, so you almost have to do it from look at it from like a display element. But why not consider that for your kitchen as well? Like the ambient lighting you could all have on the same section, and then you can just turn it from task to the ambient, you know, when you're not directly in that space, or while you're having a glass of wine or something.
I also feel as well like the lighting category is a technology category at its heart. It develops quickly, it changes quickly, and it's not so much about this year, it's a new color or it's a new material. The technology changes so quick within our space. There has to be a level of understanding to it, but therefore a company should be able to pass that knowledge on. What Sensio is not about, it's not just about selling lights. You don't do it that way. You educate and you show the knowledge of what lighting can do to the furniture, and that sells the light. So it's a total reverse way of looking at it. I don't want salespeople selling stuff. I want people educating the market so they can specify it. And the more they specify, the more they sell. It's got to be a value add proposition around it. But to do that, you need to be face to face to people. We've now got 5 regional training managers in different territories now, but all they've got to do every day is talk about lights. They don't have to sell anything. They've just got to empower the people to design it in.
And that's it. And then obviously then we pass that on, as I've mentioned, to sort of homeowners and things like that, and we get that passion that you've got, you know, with your team and yourself, which is so important. So let's talk about sort of more design specific queries then. So when I met you guys at KBB, was there something recently that's been added where you can add sort of a strip underneath your worktop for like a handless kitchen, for instance, rather than having to router out into the worktop, which can be very expensive?
Yeah, we're always looking. We have quite a big R&D facility near Leeds, and we build kitchen sets, and we're always looking at how to integrate lighting in a simple manner. And there's really 2 things that we try to solve. We try to make it easy for the designers to specify. So it's simple to understand what you need, what length, what goes with what. But secondly, it's got to be simple for the installer. So we're going to be going to the installer show in June, where we'll be talking to installers about how easy it is. But in terms of lighting design and where the market is today, we're very much following a trend of where the Europeans are. So if you go to CCAM or Interzum or one of the European trade fairs for what we do, it's very much about the lighting is hidden. You see the effect, but you don't quite see the light. So we're spending a lot of time designing around the application of where can you put it without seeing it, but it looks really good. So it's that embedded, integrated lighting systems is where we're spending a lot of time. In terms of like where the future innovation will go, you can only design so many under cabinet lights, and there's no more value in that. What we're looking at though is back to solving problems, and it's how easy is it to install and how easy is it to specify. That's where a lot of our time goes in a lot of our innovation patterns.
So say if I had a client then that was like, obviously I know it's not directly up to them to think about the installation because that should be on the electrician. Say if you've got a client that doesn't know where to start with lighting, but is there anything from an installation point of view that they can do to ease the process, or be like, you know, if they're worried about having lots of lights everywhere and their electrical board isn't going to warrant it or whatever, is there anything that they can ask their electrician?
I'd start really with from the design aspect of making sure that the product is designed correctly for the design, and not really going into too much of the worry of how does it connect? Will it be okay? The systems are so simply designed now that everything can be connected simply. And actually, I would say from the point of view of the process, the design stage and making sure the end effect of what you get is more important really than can it be done? Because to be fair, with our systems nowadays, anything can be done. And we've made it so easy for the electrician to understand it. It's not actually where the biggest barrier probably comes. I'd say the biggest barrier comes from using the right light in the right location and making sure the designers get the application right first.
Yeah, that's fair enough. And going back then to the design part of that conversation, so what are the sort of top three or top five things that you would implement in your kitchen design, for instance, and why? Just so clients understand the diversity of the products out there.
I think for myself, I think it's all general preference of how far you go with it. But for myself, I like things to be integrated. I like things just to work without me to think about them. I don't want lots of switches or light switches. I just want it to work. That's important to me. But I also would router a lot of the products into the wood to make it part of it. I don't want to put an under cabinet spotlight underneath because we did that 15 years ago. I want to do something that has more of a style and effect, and we do a lot of our LED strips now where there's no diode in it, which means you don't get the dot. So it's all seamless. It's a different game. And at KBB this year, we introduced a 2 millimeter thick LED strip, which is the thinnest that's ever been designed. So you can do things that are really smart because it's not clunky and you can hide it away. So for me, I want it sort of hidden. I want most things lit because it's just an obsession I have about lighting. And finally, I don't want to think about how things operate. The lighting just works. And that's where we're going now with our systems.
So you would integrate like a lot of sensors. So say if you've got like a display cabinet, for instance, you'd look at having a double sensor to the top of the cabinet so that you're not having to open the doors, flip the switch, and then the light comes on. And then obviously you've got that element of it where you could just walk away, then leave that light on for however long or whatever.
Yeah, it's so low wattage. It's very environmental in terms of consumption of electricity, and it's very cheap. Even the cost of electricity now, it's still not a big deal because how low the wattage and consumption is of LED. But actually, for me in my own house, I use everything on voice control.
Do you? Love that. And is that something that can be organised through yourselves, or is that you an addition?
No, our drivers use Google Assistant and Alexa, and you can talk to it, and you can create in different controls, and you can build it into the apps. So there's different commands. So it's really come a long way, but I think it's how do we part this knowledge then back into the designers, how it all works and how simple it is.
Again, like obviously my surprise reaction, that was a surprise to me that that could happen. So this is educational for me, just as it is for homeowners at home. So I'm still a bit behind with the whole Alexa and things like that. Like I don't, because I just feel like they're listening to me while I'm in the room.
maybe I'm a bit strange from that perspective, but obviously a lot of clients are like that. And so what commands do you have, for instance? Is it like Alexa, turn on task lighting, or is it just
No, I'm a bit more basic. Just turning the lights on, turning the lights off. Dimming is one. Where we are going with a lot of our control systems in the future is you won't need to talk to them. They'll just know and they'll just do it. At the next KBB, that's the type of technology we'll be talking about, which is a lot more software driven.
so it'll be like you walk into the rooms and it's dark outside, therefore they know that the full LED ceiling lights need to be put on
It'll
with the
just
cabinet
know
lighting.
that that's the goal.
That's exciting. So if you've got a chopping board going underneath your wall cabinet,
It'll know
that's
that
going to be
too.
the case. It'll know. God, it's scary. They'll know more about what I'm doing than I will. Okay, amazing. I mean, I've never liked adding colour with lighting, to be honest. But do you still find that that's wanted? So obviously you've got your different hues, which are like the neutrals, like your cool whites, your natural whites. Is there anything that you can offer listeners knowledge on that, and also if there's any other options?
I think you sort of nailed it there. I think the days of reds and pinks and greens, not that it's not nice or distasteful, but it's not where I think the trend is of lighting design. Mixing hues and color temperatures is, and I think that has a big impact. Where today in a lot of lighting design, people will just choose a color temperature. So everything warm white, everything cool white. Mixing color temperatures, I think, is actually really interested in design for different applications. So that's something that I'd push more in terms of where design goes with lighting systems.
So let's go more in on that then, because I'm the person that's a bit OCD about making sure that all the hues are the same. So when would you introduce a cool tone, for instance?
Cool is generally used for anything task, so anything where you want to see exactly what you're doing. And our LEDs have something. This is getting as far as technical as we'll go today, but color rendering index. And when you're in cool white, the color rendering index really shows whatever the color is of the object below it. So higher the index, the better the light output of the true color. So high color rendering index in cool white shows you what you can do in. But then in zones there, like what you said, the areas now are normally dining and kitchen and living all in one. To be able to come away from the zone of what you're doing in the kitchen, the sensor come off because it doesn't pick you up, or you swipe a sensor, and then everything else in the kitchen for ambient to be more warm and slightly more dimmer. So it's using the brightness to dim to high and the lux level of lumens between cool and warm in the Kelvin to be able to then how do you work it all out and how it balances. So in the future, that's where lighting systems will do this automatically in the future.
So essentially what I got from that then, so your task lighting doesn't necessarily need to be on a dimmer. It's more that's your task lighting that's on, that's relevant to obviously the task at hand. If you're chopping your vegetables, you want to know what you're doing. And then your ambient lighting is where you'd introduce the sensors, the sort of the dimmable switches, like in order to create that softer tone. And I suppose you can alter that relevant to how dark it is outside.
And it all can be done with remote control systems. So this is only my personal view of how I would set it up. I'm sure there's loads of people saying, "Well, what is he on about? That's rubbish." But it's preference, and we've got the technology now where you can play with things. It doesn't have to be a set thing anymore. In my days of a garage, we were selling halogen lights, which were this horrible warm color. That's all you could sell and all you could design with. The market and technology is changing, so you can do what you think's best because it allows the option to do that.
This is so true. And it's even like when you spoke about not having the spots of lights in sort of your strips and things now, like if you need to encase it in sort of like a recessed strip, for instance, rather than having those spots traditionally just fixed to the underside of your wall cabinetry, it's all about, maybe you could fix a strip at the back of that. So you've got a constant glow the back of that cabinet, as opposed to obviously, as you say, like the individual lights. And even from a plinth perspective, I mean, there was a time, wasn't there, where individual plinth lights were really in and they were like almost on the face of the plinth, whereas now it's more that, again, as you say, they're integrated, they're hidden. You can use surface mounted strips for the underside of that because you can't really see it, or you can obviously still recess it if you want to, but it's just as a client understanding what's out there as well.
And my biggest challenge and takeaway for our sector and designers in general is what you learnt about lighting 5 years ago has changed now. And actually, if you're comfortable in lighting and what you're doing, brilliant, that's great. But actually, there's probably loads of other things where the technology has moved, which we can discuss and go through. So it's a bit of a category which takes a little bit of time to learn and understand because of the pace of the change of technology.
So from a designer perspective then for this, so is there did you say there's a source that designers can go to within your company to be like, I've got a client that wants to automize everything as much as possible, can you help me?
Yeah, so I think we believe in transferring knowledge. We don't believe in doing the job for them, because if we do the job for them, there's no transfer of knowledge. So we will never specify plans, and that'll be something our business will never do, because if we're doing that, it means we did a bad job at making the system simple anyway. So I think the resource that we give into the market that gives our brand some uniqueness is that we have people on the road which will come and see people face to face. We have a training vehicle that we can bring to premises to train staff. We have loads of content and tools behind the scenes that we can give, but our goal is to impart the knowledge, not to retain the knowledge and just do it. Our job is to educate the market.
Yeah. And so say if I've got a client then that's after all these things, like, is there a certain place that they can see what's out there? So say if they're working with a supplier, for instance, that doesn't show the light that we mentioned earlier, like the 2 mil drip that can, go on the inside of your worktop. So say if they don't have that on show, are there platforms where clients can see these for themselves as well?
Really, for consumer facing inspiration, we put a lot of design and a lot of effort into our Instagram channel, because that's where people are looking for when they're going through the process of new kitchens, bedrooms, bathrooms, carpentry. They look for sources online, so Pinterest, House, Instagram. We have to give them the inspiration of what we do, and a lot of our customers or direct customers will show their projects. So it becomes like a portfolio book for clients, but also it becomes a resource center for them to pull knowledge about what we're doing as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's it, isn't it? Because I think as a homeowner, not in the industry, you don't really know what's out there. You're barely like, you may not have even bought a kitchen before, or if you did, it was 5 catalogue color options for this. As you say, one standard halogen light. So I think clients probably don't even know that all this is out there unless they are looking at platforms like that, like your Instagram socials and things, just to see, oh, okay, this light can go on, like as I'm opening this, how do I produce that for mine?
And I also think as well is that it's not always the responsibility of the client to understand it. The client will see a picture and say, I like that. And actually, it's the design's responsibility and accountability to make it work.
Yeah, for sure. So now going back to what are the sort of the warranties and lifespan of your Sensio lights? Like, is it something that you would have to change quite often, or?
No, so we have got to a point now where we've tested and tried and developed and incrementally improved the technology now where we don't even bother talking about it. The product just doesn't fail. It'll outlast a kitchen.
Okay. So say if it, for whatever reason, a client's got one of your lights and it's not working, it's more sort of the installation part of it where the error should be regards to that.
Again, if education is passed on correctly, there shouldn't be an issue then with installation. We have a 5-year guarantee on everything we do. If any of our product ever failed in market, which it doesn't, we just replace it. What we don't want to do is create pain and hassle. I think companies and designers and installers have already got a hard enough job doing what they've got to do rather than worrying about things breaking and replacing them. So our brand is very much about quality. We're not the cheapest brand in the world. We're not going to be, because using the components we do means we can't. But what we've got to do is to make sure the brand exists in another 20 years. We've got to make sure that we hold that brand value, and innovation, quality, and how we support people is our main priorities.
Yeah, and I think as well, like previously what we said earlier, so lighting's sort of like an afterthought, but as you say, it's actually not that expensive to implement. If you go from the automation, things like that, there's I would assume more involved in that in regards to a cost perspective. I might be wrong.
It is, but not probably what you'd think. And I think what's absolutely mind-boggling for me being in this industry so long is we still have a high proportion of retailers and designers which just leave the lighting installation to the electricians, which absolutely blows my mind, because to me that's part of the design process of what it should be, where it's a huge opportunity. Because if you're adding a couple of £100 every time a kitchen goes out the door, the attachment rate value is absolutely massive. I get everything designed correctly. Yep, totally.
Absolutely. Well, this is it. And this is what I sort of do with my clients. So it is still one of the last things I think about, purely just because I want to get the aesthetics and function together first in the layout. So please don't be annoyed at me for that. You're like, no, lighting needs to come absolutely first. Though. No, and then it will be more about, so if this is like a working dresser, for instance, like, you know, the automation element, as we mentioned, would, or the sensors would work best. A general hue going over everything would work best. If you're using glazed cabinets, you know, a single recessed spot at the top of your cabinet works well. Make sure you've got glass shelves. So don't just get, you know, your cabinet shelves in, because obviously the logic tells you that the light won't carry through, and then you'll be disappointed from that perspective. So almost as well, like talking through about the obvious things about like that. Like I've had clients before that's, you know, we've been like, oh, it's actually cheaper to get rid of your glass shelves and then implement just the cab material. But there's no point you having a light in there or having it as a display if you are looking to do that for such a small sort of, you know, cost consideration. So it's really just forward thinking.
I found two things in my time of how designers work our category. On one hand, they'll talk through what you can have, a bit like what you've just done with me, and talking through the options. On the other hand, you get people that just do it and don't tell them. Because if you want the best kitchen and the best design, this is what it's going to look like, and this is how it's going to be done. And of course, there's budgets and there's people got to achieve certain price points of what we want to do. But if you're redoing your kitchen every 11 to 12 years for a couple of £100 of lights, it's good investment over that period of time.
Yeah, especially as you say, from a lifespan perspective, if it's outlasting the kitchen, then that makes that high priority from that perspective as well.
And here's the interesting point, you know, leave it to the electrician and they can buy some cheap stuff off Amazon and it will last a year. But actually that part is connected to that kitchen design. So when them lights stop working from Amazon because they were cheap fitted by electrician, the first person will say about the kitchen is, yeah, I liked my kitchen, but my lighting stopped working.
So it's just adding that negative spin on something that you should be fulfilled with for many years to come.
I think for me, what I'd express as one of the biggest takeaways from what I do in the kitchen industry is that the category has such an amount of importance to that individual look. And I understand that there's many more categories that take a priority over lighting because it is an accessory category, and I understand that. But it is one of the few accessory categories which can add so much value to how it looks and how the wood looks and how the worktop looks. It's seen. It's not like wire work that's hidden. That becomes a functional thing of how it's used. Lighting is actually how good that kitchen looks.
Yeah, and it's the function and offers, as you say, or it enhances the overall aesthetic as well. So it is really about tying in those elements. And I mean, as I said before, I like matching all of the hues. So I will be looking at a few examples after this to see where people have worked with different hues and temperatures of lighting. So that's an interest to me.
What I would promise everybody though is that lighting is simple. And the perception of what you may have of it is that it's complicated. I don't understand it. There's too many drivers. I promise you, we have defined it in such a simple way now. We can pass the knowledge so it retains and stick, and it's not difficult.
Yeah, and from a client perspective, so with jobs, normally you include the drivers and the LED like casings or the, you know, the actual lights themselves. All of that can come from your kitchen supplier. So then it's just the direction then for installation to your electrician. Say if I've got a client that, you know, wants or is incorporating all of your lights sort of everywhere, but then wants to go for quite a statement pendant light, for instance, going over their lighting system, is that something that can still be automated within your products as well, in a sense of, so that's added to the ambient lighting that we've discussed previously?
I think it then comes to how the system gets put together. So our lighting can work alongside anything within a system. So pendant lighting is a bit of a strange one because there's a billion different designs, a billion different shapes, materials, finishes, and it's something that's very much about personal taste, which would take you into a very different world. But there's no doubt that everything can be linked together and you can make it one space with different lighting systems.
I'm just trying to think actually, because you probably would want your pendants on during the task lighting, because normally if you've got pendants on your islands, or a lot of islands now are incorporating either your sink or your venting hobs, etc., on it. So that would still be part of the task lighting element.
And what's interesting about pendants is pendants has always been done as a separate category because it's a bit of an interior design position. It doesn't quite fit in the kitchen, but it is part of the kitchen and it is important to match it right. There's a lot in our development pipeline about how this works and how things interconnect, because at the moment, exactly what you're saying, it's sort of slightly different, but actually it should be the same thing. So this is something that you'll see from us in the coming year or so.
Yeah, okay, happy to hear that, because I never know how to answer that for clients. And I'm always relying on electricians to answer that. I mean, great. Like, I've worked with teams before that are amazing and they do sort of the whole job and they're really great at educating me about how I can obviously help clients as well. But if you are with like a less experienced electrician, or say if they need to just get the job done, that might not be their priority. So even if they have a little bit of education about it as well, like, it always helps from that perspective to know that everything can, run smoothly and link up from there.
We'll be at the installer show, so we have a big lighting stand there next to the kitchen of the future. We're there to speak to. I think what our place in the market is to support, and that is our job. We have to educate in our categories, and we are there. Therefore, we need to connect with more people to help them with what they do.
Yeah, definitely. I think from my perspective, I definitely need to learn more about the installer side of it. Obviously, I know from the logic perspective and the design perspective. I know about drivers and things like that as well. But equally, the more that we all know about that, the more that we can help the end user with everything. So when is the installer show actually?
The installer show starts on the 25th of June and it runs to the 27th of June.
And where's that based?
NEC.
Just to sort of finish on then, is there anything else that you feel like clients need to know about your lighting before they obviously finish the end of this?
I'd challenge them to just reach out. Let's talk. We're there to support. We're there to help. We are very focused on making lighting simple, and we want to be the brand that supports our market and our industry.
So what are there from a features perspective then? I know obviously we've mentioned the automation and stuff like that, but is there anything else that you feel like clients need to know about? What about the waterproof lighting strips and things like that? And where can they be used?
For me, I think for bathroom design, it's really interesting. I think in kitchen design, not as applicable because of the water regulations and what you use. I think in terms of technologies and where the market will go to, at the installer show, just as we did at the KBB, we showed a new lighting system that doesn't require cables on the lights. So that's all about a new solution. It's patented technology and it's about making the lighting simple from the install, but also the client application of you can move lights around, you can put lights where you want. So that's an interesting technology. And I think for the future technology, circadian rhythms and the health of lighting is something that we are really working hard on and we'll be showing at the next KBB.
I've read a bit about this because I am a bit of a geek from this perspective, but you can only, is it red light you can only have before you go to bed? Is it like an hour prior to bed or whatever? You're not supposed to see like glaring LED lights.
Yeah, so blue light is bad on a night time because it stimulates the hormones, which makes you basically not sleepy, which is very bad. But there's a huge amount of health benefits and lighting, and this is something where we focus a lot of our time.
Amazing. I'm happy to hear that because I again, something new that I've learned. So that's great to hear. Thank you very much, Michael, for joining me for this episode.
Thank you very much. It was really good. I enjoyed it.
Thank you for taking the time to watch this video today. If you have liked what we have spoken about, why not like and subscribe to this YouTube channel. Also, what you can do is click on the notification bell to keep yourself notified of all the new content to come.